Seattle.
Okay. And were you involved in the Seattle Committee Against 13?
Was that the name of it? I don't
Yeah.
remember. Okay, so I was not a major player in that. Um, I, I think I was more involved in the ACLU's, the support that the ACLU was giving in that, through that organizational framework. I didn't go like to a lot of the community meetings directly that they were sponsoring.
Okay.
I do remember the night and the great joyfulness out on the streets when we defeated 13. It was the same election when California defeated the so-called Briggs Amendment, barring homosexuals from schools. And these two victories were important because up until that point, the right wing had won a lot of victories on the propaganda that Anita Bryant and others were promoting about gays being child molesters and all the rest of the kind of stuff. And in fact, I believe Miami-Dade County had reversed its gay rights ordinance. So the fact that, of course, national reporting being what it is, the defeat of the Briggs Amendment was played up in a lot of newspapers and not what happened here in Seattle. But we knew how important the Seattle victory was. That was still a time when Seattle was a large, small town. And most people didn't, in the US and certainly abroad, had no idea about Seattle, where it was, what it was, and everything. And that, of course, subsequently changed radically with the tremendous growth of Seattle in a number of very interesting ways. Obviously, the growth of things like Microsoft and the other IT hubs here became increasingly prominent in terms of discourse in the US and around the world about the new technologies, the computer technologies. The explosion of Mount St. Helens, believe it or not, in 1980. When I traveled to Europe after that and I mentioned Seattle, people knew where it was. They said, oh, the volcano. Whereas before then you'd have to say, yes, it's on the West Coast, it's near Canada, but it's in the US. I mean, you'd have to go through these very elaborate, because Seattle was nowheresville as far as public consciousness. And we all know how in the intervening decades, Seattle has really become a world city for a number of reasons, through many events, including not the least, of course, the WTO situation here in 1999. So what happens in Seattle now is of greater significance elsewhere than it was certainly at the time of the defeat of 13.
Okay. How did you stay active after Initiative 13?
I'm trying to remember, and I don't have lots of clear ideas. I don't know if I mentioned, if we discussed this at all when we were together at the museum. It's sort of active in gay rights things. Well, okay, so through the ACLU, which of course was developing a national gay rights project, and then after a few years on the state board, I became the state's representative to the national ACLU board. So a lot of my gay rights focus and activities were through that lens of supporting the movement as a member of the board, not a staff member, of course, but as a member of the board in different parts of the country. And then, of course, was the periods of AIDS, HIV and AIDS. And this was something that would have appealed to me intellectually, if I can put it that way, or emotionally on a number of grounds, because people with HIV/AIDS were, of course, being incredibly discriminated against, and very horrific stories of people being beaten up and denied employment, being thrown out of their homes, all these kinds of things. So as a civil libertarian and as a gay man and an activist, all of these were appealing to me. In addition, my lover at the time developed AIDS, and so I was thrust into the intensity of that situation very, very directly. we had attended, Michael and I had attended the first organizing meeting here in Seattle for what became ACT UP Seattle, and a Seattle chapter of ACT UP. And it was at the Lutheran Church on 11th, and two individuals sponsored bringing to Seattle two gay activists, one from New York and one from San Francisco, I believe, yeah, who talked about the emerging AIDS activism in those cities, and including cultural as well as political kind of stuff. All the posters, all the zaps, the cultural aspects of sit-ins and very political kinds of things. So after Michael passed away, I went to, I actually took a sabbatic. A French colleague who is very close got me an appointment in France, and I spent 5 months in Paris. And I came back, and ACT UP was just about to really get off the ground here. And so I got involved in it. And it was through ACT UP largely, and the ACLU working. I was very close to the ACLU of Washington's lobbyist, and we would coordinate a lot of stuff in terms of lobbying, in terms of stuff dealing with Olympia and other sorts of things. So it was the old story of, like, in many successful community politics stuff, there's an inside and an outside story. And that's to say, you have to be able to work inside the system with legislators. We got the basic AIDS law passed here in Washington State, which was very progressive in a number of very important ways. And then there was the outside work, where you're doing street demonstrations, you're doing much more rabble-rousing. And it was rabble-rousing, and we were very conscious about it. The period of ACT UP and the achievement of ACT UP was not only significant vis-a-vis people with AIDS, as well as the gay and lesbian community.